There is a huge spike in the amount of data being created, but not only that, it's people being able to capture, process it, and make use of it. And that's one big component that I feel is, when I'm thinking about the applications and the reason that's important, it's people are turning those things into business applications.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang. All right, so we're going to talk today about something that's really essential to your existence. And you're going to be surprised at some of the things that we're going to talk about today that are going to potentially impact you, not just today, but in the future. And you know what? Here's the beauty. It's constantly shifting. Isn't that something to get excited about? So I'm really excited today to have Jeff Coyle on with me. And so, Jeff, before we get into knowing a little bit more about you and your organization, can you please help us understand what question should B2B digital marketers be asking themselves today?
Well, what question that the questions that B2B marketers should be asking themselves today really go along with their workflows, primarily. How much oversight and understanding do they have of each stage of the various campaigns that they're creating, the various, channels that they're targeting, and breaking those up into components? How much control and oversight do they have into all of those things? I heavily, with MarketMuse, focus on content, but I think that the same thing should apply to whatever campaigns and channels that they have. And there shouldn't be any black boxes. The questions you should be asking are, do I have any black box processes, and how many of these processes are in a constant state of optimization or improvement or continuous improvement state versus ones that are historical or could be dated or could be static and floundering. And as we'll probably talk about today with artificial intelligence, you can put every one of those processes into a state of continuous improvement. So the biggest question that marketers should be asking themselves today is, how many processes do I have in place, or ideas, or quote unquote best practices that haven't evolved in the last 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? And I need that list front and center.
Okay, as you're talking, and we're going to get into knowing a little bit more about you and your organization.
Right.
By your talking, I almost start thinking that, gosh, if I'm a small operation, this doesn't apply to me. Jeff's talking enterprise, big stuff. And I don't think that's the case, is it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if you were a 2-person show, 5-person agency, however size, you probably have things that you just do. You think this is the way something is done, and you do it. Or you have some, subjective things that you go about doing things. I mean, the most common one that we will often see is in research, the research phase of a content plan or a content strategy. I've done keyword research in this way because this is the way it's been done, for the last 10 years, or this is how I learned how it was done, 5 years ago. And no, I mean, you've really got to be thinking about your existing operating procedures. Also, it's if you're a smaller operation, where are you spending your time? And is it being positioned in a place am I putting time against things that are having huge, outsized positive impact on my business? Because when you're a small business or a 1-person shop, it is your time management is the most important thing. So if you're wasting time on something that could be automated, I can't automate or scale you, right? I can only automate the tasks around you. So if you're burning clock in things that you don't need to burn clock on, you're killing yourself.
Oh, that's vitally important. And definitely talking about something to tweet, something to definitely continue to send out is what you just said right there. Okay. Right. So now, before we get deeper into this conversation, and you and I are going to have a great discussion about AI, the impact, the visibility, because you didn't exactly say that word, but visibility is critically important. Right. Understanding, knowing, value, ROI, they're all important. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and why it's so important and germane and relevant to this conversation?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jeff Coyle. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of MarketMuse. And MarketMuse is a content intelligence platform. We're a SaaS platform that's focused on setting the standard for content quality. So what we look to do is give you ways to improve the quality of your content and also enhance your content workflows with artificial intelligence, whether it's in the research, planning, and prioritization, adding or improving your content briefing or proposal processes, speeding up writing processes and editing processes, or even post-publish troubleshooting and optimization. So being able to understand what you should create, having it be data-driven, not just subjective or whiteboards, and then also what should you update? And why should you update content to make it better, to make it more up-to-date, to make it more appropriate with today's intent? So we go through all of those things, and we built out technology that can fast track the most simple workflow of, updating a page, or, how should I plan my entire year's content strategy? My background, I've been in the content strategy, search engine optimization, lead gen, A/B multivariate testing, anything that involves putting traffic through a website for about 21 years. Went to Georgia Tech for computer science. So I have a computer science, usability theory, and search engine design background. Worked at a lead gen focused company, really one of the first companies that was doing content marketing, called Knowledge Storm. Was acquired in 2007 by TechTarget, which I'm sure many of your listeners are very familiar with that organization. I managed in-house there for almost 8 years, really grew their network, managed hundreds of websites, number of acquisitions as well, before leaving to take a brief stint in private equity, and then soon after that, create MarketMuse. And the unique thing there is I went from a place of all search engine optimization and lead focus, and then being acquired by such a wonderful editorially driven organization like TechTarget, I started to see all the manual content workflows and how painful they are and how subjective they are. And I built out, manual processes to balance them. And when the time became possible, now being able to automate and semi-automate those painful manual processes. One of them is called topic modeling. And it's basically to say, if I were a subject matter expert and I were covering a topic comprehensively with content, what would that look like? What's that ideal expert content look like? And that's the basis of everything that I do. It's taking that and using that technology that we've built to solve common B2B marketer problems.
Well, okay. So, gosh, your depth of his experience is, let's just say, unmatched, without a doubt. But as you're talking about this, I start thinking about something that I read in a statistic the other day. There's two of them that I want us to talk about. Mm-hmm. One is that 90% of all the data that exists on the internet today was produced within the past 3 years. Yep. Think about that. And then the other is the U.S. Census Bureau. I just caught the report that said in the third quarter of 2020, there was a 77.4% increase in filings for people to start a business that were considered entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Now, I had this discussion and I shared this with you, and also I'll share it to the listeners and watchers. I asked my 15-year-old son the question about, what do you think about that? Just to kind of get perspective, right? Engage him in the conversation and see what his thinking was. And he goes, well, I guess a lot of those people are trying to, maybe take advantage of a lot of the, open storefronts, those businesses that have closed. I'm like, I don't know, son. I think they might end up being digital entrepreneurs. Oh, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the first part, there is a spike of written text. There's other media, also rich media being processed into text or not. And then data capture. People, obviously there is a huge spike in the amount of data being created, but not only that, it's people being able to capture, process it, and make use of it. And that's one big component that I feel is, when I'm thinking about the applications and the reason that's important, it's people are turning those things into business applications. They're turning data into a business application. They're understanding intent behind this conversation, this podcast, a sales call. They're understanding intent on user behavior on websites, user behavior in a particular media publishing set, to be able to drive decision-making more clearly, more quickly, and being able to tune and turn that into real business intelligence. Before, it was databases and, maybe, associative matrices. And that was what was driving decisions. Now it's, always in states of continuous improvement with data. The other piece you mentioned with entrepreneurship is because of the accessibility to data. These entrepreneurs, these new ones who are filing for businesses, can actually make an impact. And I had a conversation with an entrepreneur today who launched a company in December, has 2,000 clients with this business. I called him, I didn't know how large the business was. They're in an adjacent space to MarketMuse. And I got on the phone, he's like, oh no, it's just me. And this is the first product I've brought to market. And I'm like, amazed. That is the prototype. You can do it. You can do it with public libraries. You can build applications quickly. You can build tuning applications for existing things, even with very little computer science base. So the kids coming out of school today that are digital natives, they understand, how business systems work. If they get even a little bit of computer science knowledge, they're deadly because they know this stuff. They live it. They've always lived it. They didn't have to learn it. Those are the people putting out companies that spin out. And I'll get into some of the situation in natural language processing, natural language generation. But we've seen 20 new companies who are kind of adjacent competitors or kind of, what do they call co-opetition, enter the space just as these data libraries become more accessible. And that's amazing because we're a build first business. We're not a, connect first business. But a lot of these new businesses you're going to see are ones that are, I want to connect first, then build a brand. And that's something you couldn't do before because there just wasn't public access to data.
You bring up a really compelling case for, a lot of people in a lot of ways. And also when I start thinking about, the whole content piece and the entire ecosystem associated with it, and the whole visibility piece. I mean, like I start even thinking about these people who were, entrepreneurs prior and they had a big digital presence. If they don't change the way that they've been doing business, they're going to be dinosaurs. They're going to be extinct.
They are.
Yeah. Okay. So then when I start thinking about chief strategy officer, and given the discussion that we just had and talking about your background and experience, what does the chief strategy officer at MarketMuse actually do?
That's a good question. I think, all the people inside MarketMuse, some of them are still getting used to that too. And, it's a role I just switched over. Prior to that, I was a chief product officer. And I oversaw product data science, engineering, as well as marketing. But what we did was we really wanted to mature the organization. And my co-founder and me both kind of separate ourselves from the natural org structure. And he's our president, and he's focused on some fundraising, financial, and partnerships primarily. And I'm outside of that org structure, focused on effectively horizon scanning, understanding the market, but also, making sure that we are innovating constantly. And then we're not standing still for any period of time. So I'm a kind of the two-prong. One is making sure, I'm the person on stage typically, and I'm the person on the podcasts, and, but I'm also staying abreast of what this world's going to look like 12 months from now, with all of the spaces that we're in. And that's really what makes up for it. So.
Well, that's very helpful. And I would like to get into a little bit of that space, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
Talking about the, content optimization. And I think for us to start that, for those that aren't, totally familiar, and maybe they were one of those new entrepreneurs that says, okay, I need to make sure that I'm on the front edge of this and not follow people who've been doing it for 10 years that aren't changing. That's important. Is first of all, it's probably, in your perspective, I'd really love to hear this, is what is NLP or natural language processing?
So what is natural language processing, or NLP? It's programming computers to recognize and understand large amounts of natural language data. And that natural language data can take many forms. It can also be transcribed or transcreated from other forms. But basically it's understanding and recognizing large amounts of natural language data. So.
And then we have to flip that. And then that's where NLG comes into play. So what is NLG?
So that's transforming the structured data into plain language, typically English, in its kind of base form. So that's, yeah.
And NLG stands for
natural language generation.
Yes.
So it's actually
language generation.
Right, exactly right. So it's the process of taking that natural language generation and transforming that structured data into plain language with, the goal of building a language model. And the language model, because natural language is informal and can't be precisely defined, it is to say I'm assigning probability, collections of probabilities to sequences of words. And so that way I'm able to generate text through those probabilities. So it's to really a novel approach to probabilistically writing content.
Well, and okay, so let's be clear here, because what you're talking about impacts and affects something that we think are pretty normal and simple, like, hey, customer service, and I want to go and I'm interacting with this automated system. And it started with a lot of us doing it with IVRs, interactive voice response units.
Exactly.
Prior to that, there was actually a different acronym which had to do with voice response. And it was voice scripts that were prompting one to another. And that's where we've all seen the shift from it was press one, to now it's say, or call us and tell us what you're asking for. Right. It's that maturation that's occurred. So how is that maturation from, let's just say, business rules and writing to get to the point to where machines are actually now in real time interpreting and therefore responding, how that is happening in your world with MarketMuse?
Well, I mean, the first commercially available natural language generation applications were rule-based templates, and it was if-then statements, and it required structured data. So, I mean, you might have seen, some people might reference even these as like spinners, right? So you have either beautiful, gorgeous, or stunning. How many bedrooms is it? Bedroom. What type of house is it? So you get gorgeous 4-bedroom, 2-bath in prestigious neighborhood, right? That was the first type of natural language generation. That's not where it is today. That's like Mad Libs, right?
That's right.
It doesn't it doesn't have a ton of applications. It doesn't have a ton of applications outside of these really, structured narrative and structured database narrative. So
okay. So I think this is really important. And this is where your expertise can, possibly breeze over many of us. Because you can still buy those tools out there. They're called article spinners. I mean, you can actually probably get one for, $29 and download it. And it's going to, teach you how to create, an article faster. Right. They still exist. They're still in use. And that's the rules-based thing that we're talking about here. It's very simplistic in nature. You can even, overwrite some of the coding, and then in one way it will say was, and this way it will say this. I mean, and you can do all that.
Yeah. And that was really like the first flight. And then the second flight was with, really starting to try to solve real publisher challenges. So you had two wings. One of them was like, we need to do this, but in a way that's like really creative and has a lot of variability. But we'll also try to do it to solve problems. So Washington Post built a platform called Heliograph. And this was really inspirational for me. I was learning all about how they did that because it connected to a lot of common content strategists and B2B marketer and publisher and e-commerce marketers problems. And it was saying basically their problem was when events come along like elections or the Olympics, we only cover like 10% of them. We want to cover them all because our readership needs information on all of them. Why are we the ones that choose? Is it really exhibiting our true journalistic expertise when we have all the data, but we're not getting content on the page? And that's really when, my brain clicked that there's applications here. But in the case of Washington Post, in the first year that they implemented Heliograph, they were able to publish content on every single national, state, and local election and every single event on the Olympics. And they were able to program the natural language generation platform to account for exceptions, but it was still a little templated, but it got them to the next step. So for example, judo has 2 bronze medals. So if it was like a strict template and didn't have some logic behind it, their results page would have been pretty poor. It would have not been accurate. So you catch up with a couple of things and that's what really clicked with me. It was like, whoa, I'm going to be able to do this with content that is appropriate for marketers to publish, for editors to publish, for writers to publish, because my innovations at that point were focused on building outlines and structuring content, the topic, to say, if I were covering this topic comprehensively, what are the things that would naturally include? My next frontier, at MarketMuse was, how do I structure that into a logical outline to accelerate writers? And now the newest versions of what we've built starts to write to comply with the outline and to be able to be tuned from my existing content. And so in parallel, you look at things like everybody has probably experienced, like Google Smart Compose. So if you're in your Gmail and it starts to finish your sentence for you, that's an application of natural language generation. If you use Grammarly or Hemingway, that's an application of it as well, where it's giving you information. If you've seen like Microsoft Azure Computer Vision, where it does image captioning on the fly, or seen these new artificial intelligence solutions, and I'll talk about GPT-3 in a second, where they're summarizing text. All of these things are use cases that have immense value. These are things you're doing manually. And so what we're trying to think of, every time you're typing text of any kind, the future is, what of that could be automated? And that's really the answer from a natural language generation perspective, that all marketers should be saying. If I'm doing anything in a repetitive nature, if I'm doing something that isn't truly coming from the heart, it's not coming from subject matter expertise, it's not truly blue ocean, something only I can put on paper, should I be doing it or should it be automated? And that's really the question that gets to the bottom of, the same quandary that Washington Post had and said, wow, we have all the results, but we only cover 10% of the events, right? Now it's to say, I know exactly what I should write on my website. I know all the content I want to build, but for some reason, I only get 5% of it onto the page, 5% of it published. Or I want to be able to take on 20 clients because I could really help them all, but my bandwidth only allows me to service 4 as an agency. Those are the types of things we're looking to solve with NLP and natural language processing and natural language generation. And that's where I'm looking to truly innovate, is situations where someone could help the world to be a better place, the quality of content on the web getting better, but today they can't.
As you say that, I started thinking about a conversation that I had with somebody earlier today who is a content creator, and she started mentioning something about her production process. And she's been in business for 30 years. And I started thinking about that process. And I'm like, talking about those statistics, talking about the competition, talking about, I've got to produce faster. I've got to produce better. Otherwise I'm getting I'm just getting drowned out with everybody. You talked about blue ocean. No, I'm in nothing but a red ocean.
Yeah.
I'm getting chewed up and I'm getting flushed down with, all the other stuff. There's no way I can stand out. So I think for a lot of us, we have seen the progression and maturation and success and what it looks like. The bar's just been raised, and it's continuing to be raised, at a faster rate. And we can't ignore that.
Yeah. And my dream is that there's no market for low quality content. I say this, I want to raise the bar for the quality of content on the web so that entire bottom, that onesie, twosie cent garbage content ceases to exist. And we're really close to that being a reality. And I'm excited about that. That was one of the things. It was like rid the world of low quality content. That was one of MarketMuse's missions. And I love that because it makes subject matter experts, it makes great writers, it makes insightful strategic minds and content strategists in the pole position. And they're not reliant on poor processes or whatever. And, you had the question that B2B marketers should ask at the top of the show. I'll say the question that content strategists and content marketers specifically should ask is, do they know their content efficiency rate, which is how much content do I publish, or how many content update motions do I take, and how many of those achieve the KPIs that they are set to create, to generate. That percentage number, that content efficiency rate that is the number one 2021 question all content marketers should focus on, because I think the world has said that number should be about 10%, and we should be okay publishing 10 articles to get one to be successful. And that's complete garbage. Solutions like what I do make that number 40, 50, 60% plus. And so you get a writer that's fumbling across a manual process. And then after all of that, the thing you publish is only 10% efficient. Like only 1 in 10 is going to be successful. There's no more life there. No more life there.
Well, so maybe it's important for you to define what efficient really means, because again, you're coming from a base and level of understanding that, as I said, none of us have. All right. So what do you mean by that?
I'm saying you got to know what it means for that page to be successful. So I expect this page to generate this much traffic, to level up the rest of my site's authority, to generate this many leads over a period of time. So whatever or to, influence this many, this much data if I'm a publisher for my intent products or whatever it is, I've got to know what I'm looking to do. How many entrances, how often is it going to be found naturally by people walking through my site? So page views and other engagements. The efficiency I'm speaking about is knowing how much investment I'm making in that, and then of the stuff I publish or of the content that I'm updating, how frequently do I achieve that per page or per collection goal? So I might say I need to hit at least 1,000 page views in 3 months. Well, how many of my pages actually achieve that goal? The unfortunate reality is most businesses are doing that at a 10% or worse rate. And that's,
as you say that, I'm like, and also too, when you start talking about some of those, key performance indicators associated with content creation, I'm like, well, nobody's ever measured that. That's kind of always been the whole joke about, marketing investments. Half of my marketing budget is working. I just don't know which half. I mean,
we just get lucky, but it's so true. So many people, and that's why having an on-demand content inventory or auditing solution is so critical. Like if you can't go in and you don't know who you are, the mirror isn't clear of like, what do you have what is strong? Where are you strong? Where are you weak? Where do you have gaps? Where do you have opportunities? If you don't have that and you do an inventory once a year, it's nonsense. If we were covering natural language generation and we hadn't updated our editorial calendar or our inventory for a year, you know how out of date that would be? I mean, this industry moves so fast, but you probably have a similar situation. It leaves you open to competition. It leaves you open to just the intent of words changing. I mean, there's just, these things need to be always on. You need to know whether something is going to be successful before ever even starting to write it.
Well, and as you're saying that, I start thinking about an example of needing to shift. How much do I need to shift how I actually are creating content, and think about it from a style perspective. And I'll give you a quick example. A good friend of mine, he's written like 25 books, and when he writes an article, for the web, it's like a book page. I mean, it's 6-7 paragraphs, then a 6-7 paragraph, and then a 6-7 paragraph, and I mean, it's beautifully written. He's got good information, but that's not what works today on the web.
And it could. It depends, right? It depends on, you might be able to take, and I'll give you a great example. I've worked with teams to take 200-page books and turn them into entire websites. Like hundreds and hundreds, thousands of pages, right? And so you can do a lot with the base material. You can also publish that base material in a way that creates a narrative or a stream, whether you pattern it into more of a cluster model, a different architecture, or you piece it out, or you supplement it with, interesting anecdotes or interesting commentary or annotations to make it weave into the rest of your site. There's so many things that a content strategist and a very creative information architect or search engine optimization professional can do with written word, more so than just plopping it into the blog silo that has a link on the bottom of your site, right? Which doesn't work. That's the part that doesn't work. It's not thinking about your content inventory as this living interwoven thing, which is where many businesses who are product first and not marketing first, or not product-led growth first, they kind of subjugate their blogs over here and kind of don't want to look at them. And that has to stop. Like that has to be silo broken, or else you'll get somebody who's a beautiful writer who's written 25 books and they publish their blog and no one reads it.
Yeah, it's just, the whole metrics associated with ranking, is, we're looking for time on page. We're looking for, how they go within the blog to other pieces of content. We're looking for, linking of authority to authority sites. We're looking for all these different factors that, as I refer to them, the Google gods want to see, in order for you to be indexed higher. So that's what I kind of referring to when I think about style. If I'm just doing 6-7 paragraphs, 6-7 paragraphs, and I have that as my style, I'm probably not going to rank very high. That's why I need a tool like MarketMuse in order to help me to change those things so that I'm more optimized. Is that a correct assumption or no?
It's absolutely true. The one piece I'd add, though, is that friend with 25 books who's a beautiful writer, he's the part of the raw materials that can't be replicated. You can turn him as a resource into the most powerful weapon you have with MarketMuse, with thinking about these things. It's how do you go through that motion? Authoritativeness as measured by Google, I'm not going to call them the gods, but authoritativeness as measured by Google is a tough thing. It's not done. It's done at the topic level. It's done at the site section level, not just the site level. And it's basically an associative matrix that says, how likely is it that this page published on this part of this website is written by a credible source? Now, I can connect that to my breadth of coverage and my depth of coverage and how frequently I cover this topic well and comprehensively and like that which a subject matter expert would. So if I've got authoritativeness and then I'm covering a topic well and strongly, like that which your friend does probably when he writes, that's the magic potion.
So what we're talking about, and I think you kind of said it, you kind of go back full circle. It's getting rid of the stuff that is, lower level, type of content, giving, the people who do have, the ability to be more authoritative to be that. And really, separating out the expertise and all that value that can be, absorbed by us as content consumers, right, in a way that's just never been able to before, and that's very helpful.
Yeah, and that's where that's why that subject matter expert, the person who's not a good writer but knows everything, like getting all that information out of their brain, and then pairing that with a great content strategist, someone that truly understands buyer persona development, truly understands the complex buy cycle, doesn't fall into victim of these like aged tactics, like one word, one page, which is garbage. It's always been garbage, but it's now it's even more garbage. You need to have wonderful clusters and collections of content that tell the story, that all the aspects of every topic. So a topic, then you have all the related topics that you're covering well. You have all the intents that people might be thinking about that are in the journey that you care about, all the different levels of understanding. So it's not just writing the best definition, what is natural language generation? It's walking through the entire process of someone wanting to know all the use cases, all the variants, all the comparison content, all the investment content, all the troubleshooting content. It's getting in and saying, what of that can I produce? When you pair that with true experts, and you're not bogging down these writers doing things like keyword research, which is the biggest pain. You take somebody who's a wonderful writer and you make them do SEO work. Oh, it's just pain. And that's what we've been doing for years, right? When you take away those needs and you make those just part of their tool set, they become deadly weapons. And that's the key.
Jeff, this has been an amazing discussion. I want to make sure we hit some things that we have to hit before our time is up here. Sure. And if we're already over, but this has been such great discussion. It's so important because I think, to me, this is like futuristic, but yet it's relevant today, and it's going to continue to be that way. I want to get your definition of, what is B2B digital marketing?
B2B digital marketing is understanding the customer really well, and not just the buyer journey, but the knowledge journey of the target customer, and mapping that to a portfolio approach to all the possible channels that you have at your disposal. And I'm talking everything from pay-per-click to Clubhouse, every channel you can possibly have. It's managing that like a money manager, like a portfolio manager, and truly understanding the KPIs and impacts. So I know customer first, I know the buyer journey and the knowledge journey, but I'm also pairing that against my portfolio approach. And if you go customer to channel portfolio really well, you're doing marketing.
So, I mean, for me, you're saying we got to raise our level of business acumen. And we can no longer, accept the response of, well, half of my marketing budget is working, I just don't know which half. We can't deliver that response anymore.
No, right. And there's a lot of preconception. I just like to always challenge anyone that says something is definitive. Like if you think something's been true for more than a year or 2 years, like challenge it. Really think about it. Like I had a great discussion with a VP of marketing the other day, and they said, should I be buying with PPC? Should I be buying my brand terms? And I'm like, what do you think you should do? Well, I think I should. Okay. People have said for years that we shouldn't because it's just, wasteful. And I'm like, well, if you think that some people are saying one thing and other people are saying the other, there's more that you need to peel back that onion. And there's a really, really good analysis that's needed to make the right decision there. So I always like to think of, what are your truisms? What are the truths that you've believed for more than 2 years? Get them written down and challenge them.
That's so true. And now that does not to say forget everything you used to know, but by no means.
Right.
I mean, it's just, build upon and stack upon,
Right.
And I think that's critically important. Okay, so let's get to one last aspect here when we start talking about the investments that are made into the marketing department and looking at where they are being made and how they need to shift for 2021 and going forward. Where do you think we should reallocate some funds in our current spend?
I think if you do not have, it depends on your size of your organization. But if you are bigger than a 50-person business or so, if you don't have a content strategist on your team who's constantly thinking about planning, creation, what should we update? That's something that I would be thinking about. If you aren't updating content and you're just publishing new, that's an investment you need to make. If you do not have artificial intelligence involved in any way in your content marketing program, that's another one. And then another one that I am very, very passionate about is lead scoring. If you are a lead gen focused businesses, most of us are in B2B tech or B2B, are you predictively lead scoring? Are you using artificial intelligence to score leads? If you're not, you need to make the investment to begin scoring leads predictively. It is a game changer for any business.
Well, it's using data effectively. It goes back to that business acumen, also taking that rifle approach or that scalpel approach instead of, shotgun or dynamite. It's
right. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's efficiency. And that's where, people always laugh at when they look at our technology stack at MarketMuse, because we're tooled up with software, like 100-person business, and we're only a 45-person business. Because we've just seen the impact of adopting great technology.
Well, what you just also talked about, though, from a strategy perspective, is scalability.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, for sure.
Set the scale.
Mm-hmm. And that's where we are, constantly thinking through. It's just to say, what are people doing that people shouldn't, so that those people can do better things. And, that's constantly something that we're doing. And that's why we're always shifting the chess pieces around as well.
Jeff Coyle, I've had an awesome time learning, conversing, communing, commiserating in some instances.
Right.
How does the B2B DM game get in touch with you?
So Jeffrey_Coyle on Twitter. I'm active on LinkedIn as well. Please send me an invite request. Point out that I was on this show if you saw that. Jeff@marketmuse.com. We also have a wonderful Slack community for anyone interested in content. The Content Strategy Collective. If you'd like an invite to that community, there's almost 1,500 content strategists, data scientists, and search engine optimization professionals who have a lot of fun conversations, but really lifting people up and trying to give them ways to solve these common business problems.
You can also go to b2bdm.com and search Jeff's name, Coyle, Coyle, or even Jeff. We also have some special things that you'll be able to download in regards to help you move forward in you building the right team for today and tomorrow. Jeff Coyle, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. We wish you the very best.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.